Hello everyone, welcome back to Array Blog once again. So today I will show you how to build a basic HTTP server in C. Yes, you heard that right. A web server written completely in C. So we'll go through the code line by line. And so by the end of this video, you will not only understand it, but also will be able to run your own server. So let's dive in. So what I'll do, I've created a file here and I'm going to import all the necessary file. So I've written that and I'll just copy paste it so that we can save some time here. Right. So this is the all the necessary file that we are necessary headers that we are going to use in in our our program. So let me explain this. So stadio.h basically is for input output memory function. Stdlib is basically that in memory function, right? The studio.h is basically input output, and stdlib is for memory function. String is for handling the string, and this one, the unist is for give us access to read and write the system calls, right? So unist dot basically it give us access to read and write system call, right? And the arp inet is basically for internet operation, right? This is for internet operation, and this one you are seeing here, net inet.inh, is basically for handling the IP addresses, right? And this one, the system and socket.h, basically is for providing the socket function that we need, right? So what we'll do, we are going to define our port and buffer. So hashtag will say hashtag define, and we'll say port 8080, right? And then we are going to define buffer size. I'll explain why we are using the buffer size here. 1024, right? 1024, yeah. So we are defining the constant, and the server will run on port 8080, right? Which is common port for development. And the buffer size is basically 1024. It's byte 1024 bytes for reading incoming data, right? Now what you're going to do, we are going to declare our main function, right? So this is our main function, and we are going to declare variable, right? So we'll say int server underscore fd new underscore socket, right? And semicolon. I'll explain what it does, why we are using this, and also, yeah, I'll explain everything. Just let me write this. So we'll say struct. This is, we don't need this struct. We'll say sock address underscore in, and then we'll say addresses, yeah, then semicolon, right? We'll say int address underscore, we can say a double d len equals to size of, you can say addresses, right? So this is and there is one more thing I forgot to write here, that buffer, and we're going to say buffer size. Yeah. So server fd is basically will store our server file descriptor, basically the server socket. New socket is will represent the this one. The new socket will represent the client connection, right? And address is a structure that holds server detail like IP and port. Address length is basically the this one. It basically keep tracks the size of the structure, and buffer is where we will store data received from the client side. Now what we're going to do, we are going to create our socket. So we'll say server underscore fd equals to socket, yeah, this one, the socket, and we'll say af AF underscore inet. I'll explain what I'm writing here and why writing here. Oh, so will be sock stream and then 0, right? Yeah. And we are going to check if the connection happen or not, right? So we'll say if server fd equals to 0, then we'll say p error, and we'll say socket failed, and we'll say exit, and we can write here exit failure, right? Yeah. So this is we are creating a socket right here. So this is creating socket. We and using the socket function here. AF inet is basically we are using IP version 4. Socket stream means we want TCP reliable connection, right? And 0 is basically just by default things, right? So if socket connection failed, we'll print and this line if socket connection fail will print an error and exit, right? So what we are going to do, we are going to setting the server address now. So we'll say addresses dot sin underscore family equals to af underscore inet, right? So here we are setting the server address, right? And so we'll say addresses dot sin underscore add address dot s address, right, equals to in, just give me a second, yeah, in for any, yeah, this one, and I'll say addresses dot port equals to ht ons, and then we are going to write here port, right? So basically what we have done here in these three line, we have set our server addresses. So sin family is set to IP version 4. S dot addresses is basically IN address means the server will accept connection from any IP on this machine. And ST ons port convert our port number into network byte address. Now what we are going to do, the next thing we are going to bind the socket. So we'll say if bind server fd comma, we'll say struct sock address and then and we're going to write here ampersand addresses, right? This is what, and we'll say size of, and we're going to write addresses is 0, right? I'll explain what I've done here. So we are basically binding the connection, right? The server fd, that if the connection is established, then we are binding the server. Basically, we are binding the server yeah, binding the socket, right? And then we are going to say if, yeah, that we are using if, right? So we'll say p error. We have to just display the error if the binding has happened or not. So we'll say bind failed, right? And we'll say exit failure. Yeah. So we are saying if this happen and if this is less than equals to 0, then this the bind is failed. Otherwise, our we bind the socket to the given IP endport, right? And if the port is already if the port is already used by another process, then this will say like this will say failed, like bind failed. So what we're going to do, the next thing, we are going to listening for the connection, right? So we'll say if listen, we'll say server fd comma 5, right? And we'll say it's greater than 0. So we are saying here if server listen, then we're going to same thing, the p error, and we'll say listen failed, right? Listen failed. So yeah, this is the this listen failed, and we'll say exit, and we'll say exit failure, right? So the server start listening from incoming connection, and the 5 here is the backlog, the maximum number of pending connection allowed. So basically we are saying the 5, and the maximum number of pending connection allowed is 5, right? So here we are, what we are doing, we are listening the connection, right? Now what we are going to do, we are going to, if all these three happen, then we are going to say server confirmation that server is running. So we'll say printf, and we will say server is running on say http localhost and we'll say 8080, right? No. So localhost, and what we're going to do is say %d. We're going to print the port \n, and then we are going to write here the port. Yeah, that's it. So here we are confirming that server. We are printing the message to the user that server connection, like the server is running at localhost 8080, right? And what we're going to do, we basically we have to do one more thing, that we have to accept the accept the client connection. Not only one more thing, we have to accept the collection and read the client request, right? So what we're going to do, we will say new socket equals to accept, and we'll say server fd struct sock address, right? This is the variable we have declared over there, and basically structure that we have declared, and we are going to say ampersand address, and we'll say socket socklen socklen t, yeah, and then percentile, and then ampersand address len, right? Yeah, and this is what we have declared, like a new socket, and we have to check it. So if new socket is 0 is less than 0, then we'll say p error, and we are going to say accept failed, right? This is what we have to write, and we'll say exit, and then exit failure, right? So we are saying here, we are just accepting the connection. This is what we have declared here, and then we are saying if the new socket is less than 0, then we'll say acceptation failed, right? The basically accept function create a new socket, this one, right? New socket for that client, and if it fail, we will exit the program. Now what we're going to do, we are going to reading the client request, right? So we'll say read new socket, and we'll say buffer, and buffer let's go size. Yeah. So what are you going to do? Printf. We'll say client request backslash n percentile s and backslash n, and we are going to say buffer, right? So basically we read the client http request into buffer, right? So for example, when you visit in a browser, you will see the get request printed in the terminal, right? So that's what we are going to do. Now what we're going to do, we are going to sending an http response to the client basically, right? So we'll say what I have just let me copy paste because it's too complicated to just type it. So this one line I need to copy this, yeah. So this is the constant, and basically we are going to sending an HTTP response to the user, right? This is what I've written. Welcome to the HTTP 200 OK content type text HTML connection is closed, right? Now then welcome to C HTTP server on array block, right? Now the next line, what are we going to do? We are going to write it, right? And we'll say new socket HTTP response, right? And strlen, and then we are going to HTTP response, right? And printf, that will say response sent to client, and we'll say backslash n, right? Now comes the fun part. We have prepared a simple HTTP response with the header and HTML content, right? So HTTP 1.1200 OK means the request was successful. We send this back to client, that is the right? And so whenever you open the browser, you will see this HTML that it will say welcome to C HTTP server on array block, right? And the final line we have to do, we have created the connection, so we have to close the connection, right? So what we'll do, we'll write the close new socket, and we'll say close server fd, and the most thing that we have declared int main, so we have to return something, right? Yeah. So let me just compile it. So it's a gcc server.c minus o, we can say server. So if you don't know how to install a gcc or how to run a gcc file, then go check out my C playlist. Over there you'll understand why we are writing this and why we are basically writing like this, right? So let me compile this first. So it's a print, okay, so we have written print somewhere. We have to write printf, where we have written print. Yeah, here it is, the printf. And is there any, yes, we have written printf. Yeah, I think so it will run. So let me clear this, and yeah. So we have compiled it. You can see this file. Now what we're going to do, we are going to run this file. So we'll say server. So it says server is running on HTTP localhost. So let me just or yeah, let me open this in a browser. So this is our browser, and we'll go into HTTP localhost C. So we got our welcome to C HTTP server on array block that we have written here, right? And we get the you can see it here, like we get all this. So we'll say server is running on this client request at localhost HTTP, keep alive all these details, and then it comes here, it's a response sends to client that we have printed here, right? So let me explain one by one again. So what we are doing here, right? So this is our the all the header files that basically stadio.h is basically for the input output, stdlib is for the memory function, string.h is for the handling the string, and unistd basically it give us access to read and write system call, and arpinet is basically for internet operation. Net inet is for the for the operation like IP addresses and sockets, socket.h, right? Socket.h basically provide a socket function that we'll need. What we are doing here, then we are defining the buffer size. We are defining the by default port that is 808, right? And we have defined the buffer size 1024. Now then we have declared the main function, then we declare the all the necessary variables, right? Now we are checking the we are creating the socket, right? And then what we are doing here, we are setting the server address using the AFINet and address or STONs, right? So AFINet is basically, if you forgot, this is IP version 4. Socket stream is basically we want TCP connection, right? And here what we are doing, we are binding the socket, right? And we are again here we are binding the socket, and then what we are doing, we are creating the yes we are create this is the binding the socket. Now what we are doing, we are listening for the connection here, that's a HTTP server is listen. Now next thing what we are doing, we have just printed the server confirmation that we have successfully created the server, and server is running on localhost, right? Localhost and then port, and this is the server confirmation. So we are checking that if the server confirmation is server is running, right? And the next thing what we have done here, this is we are accepting a client connection, right? So when a client that accept function create a new socket for the client, and if it fail, it will say we exit the program, right? And then what you are doing, we are reading the client request and printing it, and this is the we are sending a simple HTTP response, including that a simple web page that say welcome to see HTTP server on array block. And the final thing what we are doing, we are writing it, and we are printing response to client, and and then we are closing the connection, right? And that's it. We just built a basic HTTP server in C. So when you run this code, visit HTTP localhost 808 8080, and you will see a custom web page like this that that will serve directly from your C program. So if you want me to extend this to a multi-client server that handle multiple requests, let me let me know in the comment section, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So if you found this video helpful, and see you into the next one. Thank you.